Welcome to episode 5 of the Hunter Baumgardt Sports Podcast. Super excited to bring you another episode talking Wisconsin and national sports with me, Hunter Baumgardt. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at HunterBOnAir. Also go like the Hunter Baumgardt Sports Facebook page to keep up to date on what's going on with the podcast. As well as, obviously, watch on YouTube and listen on SoundCloud to each episode. Whether you are just want to listen because you're in the car or you want to watch because you're sitting at home like most of us are. So either way, you can enjoy the podcast. Today's episode, we're talking Badgers football. College football season still on is scheduled at this point. Obviously, who knows what the future holds. But as far as that goes, we've got a quarterback battle going on in Madison. And we're going to talk to Colten Bartholomew today. He is the Badgers football beat reporter for the Wisconsin State Journal, formerly of the Lacrosse Tribune, so he has some lacrosse ties. That's where I do the podcast here in lacrosse. So I'm super excited to talk to Colten and get his view on this Badgers football team, who's going to get drafted from last year's Badgers football team when the draft happens in a couple of weeks, albeit virtual draft, but still a draft. And then some Badgers are doing some great things in the community and in the Madison community to help with COVID-19 efforts and brightening people's days. And I really want you to hear that story. He did a nice piece on it. So all that coming up. Let's talk to Colten Bartholomew right now. All right, joining us on the Hunter Baumgardt Sports Podcast is Colten Bartholomew. He is a Badgers football beat reporter for the Wisconsin State Journal. Joining us on the Hunter Baumgardt Sports Podcast, you can find him on Twitter at CBartWSJ. Colten, thanks so much for joining me on the podcast today.
Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, no problem at all. And first question I'm kind of asking everybody when they come on the podcast, how's life for you right now with no sports and kind of staying home due to COVID-19?
Boring. Yeah. I've been burning through the Netflix list and Hulu and all that type of stuff. So it's not that bad. My fiance is able to work from home too. So Good. We're spending a lot of time together. So it's not bad at all. Yeah.
As long as we're healthy, right? Then everything is
there you go.
Secondary to that. So obviously I want to ask you this kind of as a person who's around college football for a large percentage of your job. What's kind of the feeling around college football as it relates to the season starting on time and kind of practices getting going on time? What's kind of the vibe right now in college football?
Yeah, I think in the last week or so, it shifted from, are we going to be able to do any type of spring practices to, are we going to be able to have a season?
Yeah,
it's been really fast shift like that because I think there was so much, uncertainty about when this would peak, when the spread would stop for this virus, things like that. And then I think in the last few days, people have understood like this is going to take a long time, and spring football is going to get canceled. I personally am anticipating the NCAA saying sometime this week, just don't even try spring football, it's over, and then shifting all the focus to hopefully getting a season started. And maybe that season's not with fans. It's all going to depend on how schools approach things with having students on campus. But if they can have kids on campus, then they'll probably still be able to play football. But it's all so much up in the air right now. That's kind of where the vibe is, where it's just not knowing and everyone's just hoping that there's a college football season come this fall.
Yeah, I'm interested, as you said, I've actually thought that they would have canceled spring practice earlier. Are you surprised that it's still up in the air at this point?
Yeah, and I understand that the NCAA is just trying to, leave the window open if something were to break, like let's say a vaccine somehow popped up or whatever the case may be. But the likelihood of that happening is so low now. I think what they need to do is just across the board say there's no spring practices. Everybody's kind of on that same page so that these schools can get kind of going on getting these kids workouts going in the summer and things like that, because certain conferences like the Big Ten has banned all team activities until early May. And then when you look at, you're already in early May, finals are the week after that, and then you're off campus, so you can't have contact with them anyway. So I think the decision will come down soon that it's just going to be across the board, no spring practices. But to me, it is pretty surprising that it's taken this long.
As far as spring practices go, obviously the quarterback position is kind of one that a lot of fans are kind of focusing on as we head into the next season for the Badgers. Obviously, Jack Cohen had a solid year last year, 18 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, 7th in completion percentage in the nation. How does not having spring practice affect that quarterback battle, if at all, or maybe even Jack Cohen specifically, who's the starter right now, but it could change? What's kind of what would be the effect of no spring practices on that quarterback position?
Yeah, it's huge. Spring was going to be big for Jack Cohn and Graham Mertz to
Hmm.
really battle it out, I think, because I think everyone knows that the ceiling is higher on Graham Mertz's future. I think we saw the best of Jack Cohn in stretches last season. Once he got over the injuries that were kind of plaguing him later in the year, we saw what Jack Cohn can be. If he can do that for a full season, then he's a starting level quarterback. I think there's just a lot of optimism, a lot of belief that Graham Mertz can take that next step and kind of be that quarterback that wins you games as opposed to makes a couple of throws and just controls a game for you, which I kind of think is where Jack Cohn is. But the problem is now that there's no spring practices, Mertz doesn't get to show how much he caught up, playbook wise, understanding the scheme, understanding college defenses, adjusting the speed of the game, all that type of stuff he was going to be able to show in spring practices. Now that he's not going to have those, do they give him those same chances in the fall, or do they just kind of stick with the guy that's they know can do the job and do it pretty well, and then maybe try to work Graham Mertz into games more often in the season? I think there's going to be a balancing act there. I don't think it's going to be another situation where Mertz only plays in garbage time and he's only playing against the scrub teams. One, because they don't have any scrub teams on this upcoming schedule in 2020. There's really only Southern Illinois that you would consider a lower tier team. They're playing Appalachian State as well, but that's a really good team that's been ranked. That was ranked almost all of last year. So I think Mertz is going to be in games more often. Maybe it's certain packages he gets in. Maybe it's, instead of being up 5 or 6 touchdowns, it's 3 or 4 late in the game. They get him in, get him some snaps. But I do think you're going to see Graham Mertz more often than we saw him last season. It's just going to be if he's able to overcome this big gap that existed early on last season, and then he didn't get a chance to show how much he gained on Cohn here in spring.
Yeah, and that's what was my thinking too. Colten Bartholomew of the Wisconsin State Journal joining us as the Badger beat reporter for them. Speaking of Graham Mertz, and you've kind of got to see him up close and personal, and we've seen videos or flashes of him, and I think that kind of is what has excited fans about him, and a lot of people were calling for him to be the quarterback last year. What have you seen in person that's impressed you the most about Graham Mertz that shows some promise here for the future?
There's an effortlessness with how he throws the ball. You'll see, especially in college, just because the disparity of where some schools grab their quarterbacks and where other schools get theirs. Some guys have to do a couple of crow hops and a big windup to get a ball deep.
Sure.
Graham Mertz is a guy that can just be flat-footed and throw it 30, 40 yards with relative ease. And I think the thing that really impressed me is the touch. He has that big arm, and then he can still, throw a ball with touch when he needs to. And even though it was in garbage time, I look back at that Kent State game. He played most of the fourth quarter. I think some of the third as well. I'll have to go back and check on that. But some of the out routes that he threw, 15, 16-yard out routes, those are college-level throws that he's in his first real, significant playing time. Obviously against a defense that's not up to caliber with, the top Big Ten defenses that you need to do it against. But still, the touch throws, the accuracy he had on those, and the things that he can do, I think, mobility-wise, while also expanding the field downfield. Because I think that's one thing that Wisconsin lacked until later in the season last season was the ability to stretch the field to get defenses out of the box against Jonathan Taylor. It seemed so simple, just give a deep shot to Quintez Cephas. But when they had some of the issues they had on the offensive line, Jack Cohn's injuries, like I mentioned, it was all just kind of tougher to do that. I think Graham Mertz, once he ends up becoming a starter, that's going to be something that's a bigger part of their game, and it's going to open some things up in the running game that we haven't seen for Wisconsin in a few years.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it, and I hope, obviously as Wisconsin fans, it's been a while since we've seen a really exciting quarterback, and one I think just Badgers fans are super starved for that. We saw Russell Wilson, what is it now, almost a decade ago. So it's been a while since we've seen these quarterbacks. Or seen a quarterback like Russell Wilson. And I think a lot of fans are excited for it.
Yeah, and it's funny because there are probably, 40, 50 Division I schools that would take Jack Cohn as a starting quarterback and run just because he's consistent and, what you're going to get from him play in, play out. It's just I think Wisconsin is on that teetering line between being wins wise and Big Ten championship game berths, things of that nature. It's an elite program. It's just cracking that top tier. It's going to take somebody at that position that really kind of vaults them over where they're at, because you can see they can build an offensive line. Obviously, they can run the ball. They can build a defense. It's just finding that guy at the quarterback position that takes them that one last step. I think that's going to be that hurdle they have to clear to become an elite top-level program.
Yeah, exactly. I want to shift a little bit to some of the contributors we've had in the last few years who are now getting drafted this season, some of the prospects who might get drafted here in a few weeks or will get drafted, specifically linebacker Jack Bond, center Tyler Biadasz, and then, of course, running back Jonathan Taylor, who was a star here at Wisconsin. So where do you see them being drafted here in a few weeks? It looks like the second round might be the most likely for maybe even all three. What are you seeing, or what are you hearing as far as where they might get taken here when we have this virtual draft coming up in a few weeks?
Right. I don't think we're going to see anybody in the first round, just the way the momentum's starting to go. I thought maybe Zach Bond would slip in there, maybe to the Ravens or the Patriots, kind of in that late 20s range. But it looks like he's going to be a guy that is going to be there early in day two, but then teams are jockeying to get him early in day two. So I think he's going to be in that second round. And I think same with Jonathan Taylor, just because the way that teams are looking at running back now, and unless you've already got a stacked team and you've already addressed a ton of positions, teams are just super reluctant to draft a running back in the first round. So I think he's going to be in that second round as well. But the thing about Jonathan Taylor is that he's a guy that teams know, outside of some of the fumbling issues that he's had, that's been his biggest knock. The thing the teams know is that we draft him, he can be our starting running back for 4 seasons, carry the ball 300 times if we need him to, do everything that you need him to running the ball. He's still got to improve as a receiver, but you're getting a day one level starter as a runner and a guy like him. The problem with Bond a little bit is that he's in an in-between spot. He played offense or outside linebacker here at Wisconsin and had a great senior season, but a lot of teams are looking at him as an inside linebacker, maybe a situational rusher. So how confident a team he is in him adjusting to playing inside and learning those things probably knocks him down in the second round. But you look at what he can do and the versatility he has, I think that's an exciting thing for teams, but just not exciting enough to spend the first round pick on him. And then you look at Biadasz, he's a really interesting case of how guys get dissected in this draft process, because he ends the season, wins the Remington Award, top center in the country, is looking at maybe a late first round, early second round pick. But then he gets hurt again. He hurt his shoulder. He's been rehabbing that throughout this whole draft process. Didn't get to do anything at the combine physically. Still got the interviews and everything, but he's now in this spot where people are super concerned about his injuries because he had the hip injury going into his redshirt junior season last year. There's been lots of discussion about how well he gets to the second level and how much he can move or handle guys at the second level in the NFL. And it's starting to look like he's going to be probably a early day three, maybe round 3, round 4 pick, when end of the season it was surefire. This guy's going to be a 10-year starter in the NFL. So I think he's pushed down a little bit, but I think he's going to be one of those guys that once he's healthy, it's going to be like, wow, we whiffed by not taking him early on in the draft.
Yeah, I'm interested to see where all these. Of course, the most maybe explosive or the most person that everybody's going to focus on is Jonathan Taylor, just because everybody loved him here and he's an explosive offensive player. But some of these like Bond and Biadasz are going to be interesting to see where they go as well. I want to finish up. Last question for you. Kind of getting a little bit back into the COVID-19 world. You did a nice piece on the Dunn brothers or what they're doing to help the Madison community during this COVID-19 time. For those that don't know, Jack Dunn is a senior wide receiver at Wisconsin. Then Bobby, his brother, is a graduate assistant coach. Tell me a little bit about what they put together to help people in need in our home state here in Wisconsin.
Right. So their dad actually owns or developed and owns a hotel called the Edgewater here in Madison. And that hotel had to lay off a bunch of workers because of COVID-19, because the hotel shut down. So lots of restaurant workers, waitresses, bartenders, all the type of stuff, all had to be laid off. But they ended up teaming up with a company called A Grace Hospice, which is a hospice care facility, and they work with a lot of in-state and in-home patients that are in need of a lot of help. And especially in this time where These people are towards the end of their life, and it's really tough for them to get around even on normal conditions. Then you add in this where they're immunocompromised, they really can't leave their homes, and neither can their caretakers for risk of bringing the virus home. So what they did was they teamed up with the hotel and this company to provide meals for these people and deliver meals for them. So they're cooking all the meals at the Edgewater. They're the Edgewater staff and the Duns and some UW football players are going around delivering these meals to these patients. And it's just cool to see them kind of giving back to their hometown, their home area, because this A Grace service goes all around southern Wisconsin. They've got about 4,000 patients and about 2,000 all within about an hour of Madison. So they're driving around giving home-cooked meals to these people. And it's one of those things where I feel like a lot of us are fortunate enough that that's not – you think like, oh, yeah, one meal is awesome, but – you don't understand how impactful that is for people that aren't able to get outside, aren't able to go get groceries if they need to just have a couple of meals taken care of throughout a week. That's a huge impact.
Yeah, and that's they've set up a GoFundMe. Is that right, to raise money for that?
Yeah, you can look up GoFundMe. If you search Team 2020 campaign, that's on there. Their original goal is $100,000. The last time I checked, it was around 36, 37. It might be up from that. I think that was Saturday I looked, but I know that they're hoping to, spread the word social media wise and get some former UW football players involved as well. And I know that's going to be something that's going to do some good here in Madison.
Yeah, that's awesome just to hear these feel-good stories come out of what has been such a weird and dark time for many with this COVID-19 stuff. So great job by some Madison football players there. Colten, really appreciate the time today. Really appreciate a couple of minutes, and really excited for this Badger season. Hopefully it can go on, and we'll definitely get you on as the season creeps closer, and hopefully we can be talking about games being played on the field.
Sounds perfect. Thanks, Hunter.
Yeah, thank you. Again, that's Colten Bartholomew of the Wisconsin State Journal. You can find him on Twitter at CBartWSJ. He's the Badgers football beat reporter for the Wisconsin State Journal. And he formerly of the Lacrosse Tribune, so he has some lacrosse ties, and we recognized each other from that, and thought I'd have him on. We'll definitely have him on again in the future, but wanted to talk about that quarterback position, wanted to talk about the draft, all the topics we covered. And I am fascinated for when Graham Mertz takes over this quarterback position, because I truly think that as Badgers fans, we are starved for some good quarterback play. Not just good quarterback play. Cohen, 18 touchdowns and 5 interceptions. You'll take that every day and twice on Sunday if you're a team in Division I. And like he said, there's 50, 60 Division I teams that want that kind of quarterback, and it makes sense. But as a team who's looking around yourself and looking at quarterbacks like Trevor Lawrence, like Joe Burrow, at some of these real top quarterbacks in the country, and thinking, Jack Cohen's not going to be that. Sure, he's going to be solid. Sure, he can get us to a Big Ten championship game, but he can't be Trevor Lawrence or Joe Burrow. Graham Mertz, I'm not saying he will be. Those are two of the top in the last 5 years, but Graham Mertz has a chance to be very explosive. You heard Colten say he is very effortless in the way he throws. That's a good sign when you're looking at how good a quarterback can be. I'm really, really excited for what Graham Mertz can do, even if it's not this year. If Wisconsin sticks with Jack Cohen, I know Colten thought that they would probably mix in Graham Mertz a little more this season than you saw last year, with probably Cohen remaining the starter. But I'm looking forward to, even if that doesn't happen, even if Cohen goes through this year, the next couple of years with Graham Mertz, that is going to be fun. Especially as he matures and he continues to learn the system with Paul Chryst. That is going to be real, real exciting. And, of course, they're going to have good running backs as well, as always. I don't know if, Jonathan Taylor, Monte Ball, Melvin Gordon type. We shall see how these next guys who are, being recruited and coming in, how it works. But I'm super excited for Graham Mertz. And if you can't tell, I'm super excited about Graham Mertz. Anyway, but wanted to talk a little Badger football, and I hope you enjoyed today's podcast. We'll be coming to you again very soon. Again, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at HunterBOnAir, and you can follow go like the Facebook page, Hunter Baumgardt Sports. But of course, subscribe to the YouTube channel as well, because then you'll just get a notification every time there's a podcast, and you won't even have to search for it. How's that sound? The ease, I tell you, the ease. But yeah, so you can watch this podcast on YouTube. You can listen on SoundCloud. couple of ways you can consume the Hunter Baumgardt Sports Podcast. But either way, whether you're watching or listening, thanks so much for joining me on this podcast. And again, thanks to Colten Bartholomew. Again, you can find his work at cbartwsj on Twitter. We'll talk to you again soon. Stay healthy. Keep staying inside. It's another week in the books, and we will continue to do everything we can to keep COVID-19 from massively spreading, especially here in the Wisconsin area. And if you are outside of this area and your area is getting hit hard, thoughts and prayers are with you. And we can do this. Let's stay strong. We're in this together. And sports will be back, hopefully, before we know it. Once again, thanks for watching or listening. And as always, stay positive.